It was the coldest night of my life. The wind sliced through the air, biting at my skin, but it wasn't the snow that stung the most, it was the words. Don't come back here ever again. My parents kicked me out that night, and I walked away alone, heartbroken and filled with a sense of betrayal. What they didn't know was that moment would set me on a path to something they could never have imagined. 5 years later, they wished they'd never said those words. Stick around to find out how I turned my pain into power, and how they paid the price for rejecting me. Have you ever been betrayed by the people who should have had your back? If you've ever felt abandoned by family, or like you just weren't enough, hit that like button, subscribe, and get ready for a revenge story you'll never forget. Trust me, you'll want to hear how everything changed and how I came out on top. I've always lived in the shadow of my sister. Growing up in Fargo, North Dakota, my parents, Patricia and Harold, always had this clear vision of what success looked like. My sister, Teresa, was their perfect image of it. She was everything they wanted. Intelligent, driven, polished, and successful. Teresa had a law degree, a high-paying job at a prestigious firm, and a fiancé who was a doctor. To them, she was their pride. To me, she was just a reminder of everything I could never be. I wasn't a failure, but I wasn't what they expected. They made that clear, constantly comparing me to Teresa. Teresa never settles for less than perfect. My grades, my ambitions, my dreams, they were never good enough. Every time I sat down for dinner, I could feel their eyes judging me. Every A- I brought home was a quiet condemnation, while Teresa could do no wrong. And it hurt so much that I started to retreat. High school was my escape. I'd slip away to local cafes or record stores just to breathe without hearing my mom's critical voice or seeing my dad's disappointed frown. That's where I met David. David Reed wasn't the kind of guy my parents ever imagined for me. He was 25, a mechanic with rough hands and a quiet confidence. He didn't have a college degree or a career in law or medicine, but when I was with him, I felt alive for the first time in forever. He didn't want me to be someone I wasn't. With him, I didn't have to compete with Teresa. When I first told my mom about David, her face froze. A mechanic, she spat, her voice cold as ice. You're meant for better than that. I knew what she was thinking. She had this perfect vision of the life I was supposed to lead, and David didn't fit into it. But I wasn't asking for their approval. I just wanted to live. As I spent more time with David, the more I pulled away from home. I could feel their judgment in every glance, every whispered conversation. One night I overheard my mom saying, "She's throwing her future away with that boy." Her voice was sharp like a blade. And my dad, well, he was quieter, but I could see it in his eyes. He was just as disappointed. I started spending more and more time with David, sneaking out of the house, lying about where I was. I was desperate to escape, to get away from the stifling expectations of my parents, from their dream that I'd become a version of Teresa that I couldn't live up to. But it all came to a head one night. I was 20 and I made a decision. I packed a duffel bag with clothes, a few of my favorite books, and some photos. I was moving in with David. His place wasn't much. A cramped apartment above the auto shop where he worked, but it felt like freedom. When I told my parents, the confrontation was worse than I'd imagined. "You're living with that mechanic," my mom hissed, standing in the kitchen with her hands trembling as she gripped a dish towel. Her eyes were cold with fury. Dad, always the quieter one, sat at the table, staring at me like I was a stranger. "Ellen, is this true?" he asked, his voice low, disappointed. I nodded, my throat tight. Then the fight erupted. My mom's words were like daggers. "You're throwing your life away." "He's nothing, Ellen. Nothing." I couldn't keep quiet anymore. "He's more than you think. You don't even know him," I shouted back. Dad's hand slammed down on the table. "Enough. You're embarrassing us." That was it. I had nothing left to say to them. I stared at him, my father who I thought would protect me, and I realized he didn't see me. He didn't care about my happiness. Teresa, sitting across the table, tried to intervene in her usual calm, diplomatic way. "They just want what's best for you," she said, but it didn't reach me. Not anymore. She wasn't willing to stand up for me. She never had. In that moment, something broke inside me. I wasn't their perfect daughter, and I didn't want to be. I wanted to be me, and they didn't want that. My mom's words rang in my ears like an echo of the past. "If you choose him, you're done here. Don't ever come back." And I did. I grabbed my duffel bag, slung it over my shoulder, and walked out the door. The wind hit me immediately, biting at my face. The snow swirled around me, but I barely felt it. I felt hollow, cold, betrayed, but also for the first time in my life free. I stepped out into the snowstorm, my boots crunching with each step, the weight of my duffel bag pulling at my shoulder like a reminder of everything I was leaving behind. The house, my family, the years of trying to measure up to an image that wasn't mine. The storm was merciless, the winds biting at my skin as if nature itself was trying to punish me for walking away. I didn't know where I was going, but I wasn't turning back. Not now. As I walked through the streets of Fargo, the cold sinking deep into my bones, I thought about what I was leaving behind. My parents, their rejection, their narrow vision of success that had never included me. And David, the guy I thought I could build a future with, the one I believed was my escape from the suffocating expectations of my family. I reached David's apartment, small, humble, but the first place in my life that felt like a home. His face lit up when I told him I was moving in. He didn't care about the drama with my parents. He didn't ask me to explain myself. He just pulled me close, his arms warm against my cold skin. And for a moment I thought maybe, just maybe, I had finally found something real. We made it work, living in that cramped apartment above the auto shop. David worked long hours, often staying late to fix extra cars for the shop, while I took a part-time job at a corner store. The pay wasn't much, but I kept my head down, focusing on surviving. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was building something on my own, without the pressure of my parents' expectations. But then cracks started to show. David, the man who I had trusted with everything, began to change. It started small. He'd stay out later than usual, his phone glued to his hand, but I brushed it off. He was just stressed, I told myself. His dream of running his own auto shop was always in the back of his mind. I told myself everything would be okay. But it wasn't. One night, an anonymous message popped up on my Facebook. "Your boyfriend's not who you think he is." I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting. The message had just enough detail about David's late nights to make my heart race. Was it a jealous coworker? A neighbor who had seen something? I didn't know. But doubt began to seep in. I started to pay attention to the little things. David stepping outside to take calls, his voice low and hurried like he was hiding something. One day, I found a receipt for a coffee shop we'd never been to. Dated for a night he claimed he was working late. I felt the ground slip beneath me as the pieces of my trust in him began to crumble. I confronted him. The confrontation wasn't dramatic. I didn't yell or cry. But I stood in the kitchen, arms crossed, my voice steady, even though my insides were shaking. "Who were you with tonight?" I asked, my eyes scanning his face, waiting for the truth. David paused, his eyes flickering with surprise, but he quickly covered it up with a laugh. "Just the guys from the shop." But I wasn't convinced. I brought up the message, the receipt, the calls. His face hardened, his jaw tightening. "You're being paranoid, Ellen," he snapped, his voice defensive, his excuses falling flat. Something in me snapped. The person I thought I knew wasn't there anymore. I had given up everything, my family, my home, my security, for him. And now this? "I'm done," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I trusted you. I gave up everything for you." David opened his mouth to argue, but I didn't let him. I grabbed my duffel bag, the same one I had packed when I left my parents' house, and threw in a few of my things. His voice faded behind me as I walked out the door. It was the same feeling I had when I left home. Alone, heartbroken, but this time it was different. I was done letting people hurt me. The streets outside were just as cold as before. The wind whipped through my hair, and the snow piled up against the sidewalks. I had nowhere to go, no plan, and my heart felt heavier than ever. But I couldn't go back to David. I couldn't stay in that life of lies and half-truths. The storm was getting worse, and as the wind howled around me, I trudged through the snow, feeling like I was walking to nowhere. My savings from the corner store were minimal, and I didn't have a safety net. The only thing I could do was keep moving, keep going. By the time I reached the bus depot, the storm had intensified. The small shelter was nearly empty, except for a couple of travelers huddling in the corner. I collapsed onto a bench, my duffel bag at my feet, trying to warm myself against the chill of the night. That's when I did something I never thought I would. I called my parents. I didn't know why, maybe it was desperation, Maybe it was a fleeting hope that they'd soften, that they'd let me come home, even for just one night. I dialed my mom's number, my hands trembling as I waited for the call to go through. She picked up. Her voice was cold. "What do you want, Ellen?" I swallowed, trying to steady my voice. "I'm stuck, Mom. It's bad out here. Can I come home for just one night?" But she didn't soften. She didn't care. "Don't come back here. You made your choice." The words hit like a punch to the gut. She was the same as before, cold, unfeeling. No care, no compassion. I tried calling my dad next, but he gave me the same response. "Don't call again." The coldness in their voices cut deeper than the snow outside. I had nowhere. No family. No home. I sat there numb, staring at the dim light of my phone screen. Then, in the silence of the depot, a voice interrupted. "You okay, miss?" I looked up to see a man in a bus driver's uniform, his badge reading Gregory Lane. He was older, with a weathered face and kind eyes. He didn't push me for details or pry into my story. He just saw I was in trouble. "You can't stay here all night," he said gently. "The depot's closing soon. Let me get you somewhere safe." I was wary at first, but something about his steady demeanor put me at ease. I followed him outside to his bus, where the engine was still warm. The snow was relentless, but Gregory navigated the empty streets carefully, eventually dropping me off at a small inn on the edge of town. "They've got rooms, cheap ones," he said, his voice comforting in its simplicity. "Get yourself settled. You look like you need a break. We all do sometimes." I thanked him, my voice shaking as I stepped out into the storm. Gregory's bus pulled away, leaving me standing at the edge of a new chapter. It wasn't a home, but it was safe. And for now, that was enough. The night I spent at the inn was one of the longest of my life. But it was also the night I made a promise to myself. I was done being a victim. I wasn't going to let anyone, whether it was my family, David, or anyone else, hold me back. The pain of betrayal was real, but I had learned something that night. Sometimes you have to walk through the storm to find your strength. The inn that night was a temporary refuge, a roof over my head when I had nowhere else to go. The heat from the small heater barely cut through the cold in my bones, but it was enough to get me through. As I lay there on the hard bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind raced through everything that had happened. I had lost my family. I had lost David. I had nothing but the cold, empty room and the weight of my own thoughts. But something inside me shifted that night. I wasn't going to stay broken. I wasn't going to let this be the end of my story. The next morning I made a decision. I was going to fight. Fight for a life I could be proud of. Fight for my independence. I pulled myself together, packing my few belongings into my duffel bag, just like the first time I left my parents' house. But this time there was no uncertainty. This time there was a plan. I had to start over. I didn't know exactly how, but I knew I had to keep moving forward. With only a few $100s left in my pocket, I used what I had to rent a room at another place, a modest studio apartment on the edge of Fargo. It wasn't much. The walls were thin, the paint peeling in places, and the faucet leaked. But it was mine. I kept my job at the corner store, working long shifts to scrape by. The work was grueling. There were days when I couldn't remember when I last had a full night's sleep. But it was enough. It was a start. One evening after a particularly long shift, I texted Wendy, my best friend from high school. Wendy was always the one who believed in me, even when I couldn't believe in myself. She worked as a receptionist at a dental office, scraping by just like I was. But she never hesitated to help. I sent her a simple message. "I don't know where I'm going, but I'm trying." Within minutes, my phone buzzed with her response. "Come to my place. We'll figure it out." Wendy's apartment was small, just a one-bedroom unit with mismatched furniture, and a faint smell of takeout lingering in the air. But to me it felt like a safe haven. She handed me a cup of coffee, sat me down, and just listened. She didn't judge, didn't offer unsolicited advice. She just listened. "You've got this, Ellen," Wendy said softly, handing me an envelope with a few $100 inside. "It's not much, but it's yours. You don't have to do this alone." I tried to refuse, but Wendy wasn't having it. "I don't want you to be alone, okay? We'll figure it out. You don't have to go through this by yourself." I took the money, my throat tight with gratitude. Wendy's kindness, her belief in me, It was a lifeline. I needed that more than I realized. Over the next few weeks, Wendy kept checking in on me, making sure I was okay. She brought me takeout when I was too tired to cook, dragged me to the diner when I looked like I was about to collapse from exhaustion. And then one evening she said something that stuck with me. "You're tougher than you think, Ellen," Wendy said, her voice steady, her eyes full of quiet admiration. "You've already made it this far, right? That's more than a lot of people ever do." I had spent so much time doubting myself, so much time trying to live up to the expectations of others. But Wendy reminded me that I didn't need anyone else's approval to succeed. I just needed to believe in myself. So I did. I enrolled in an evening accounting course at the local community college. I had always been good with numbers, and the idea of becoming a professional accountant felt like a solid plan. I worked during the day and attended class at night. It was exhausting, but it gave me purpose. The classes weren't easy, but I started to push through. I stayed late at the library, poring over textbooks and practice problems, my mind focused on one thing: building a future. One evening, after a particularly grueling class, my instructor, an older woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude, handed me my graded quiz. "You've got potential, Ellen," she said, handing me back the quiz with a rare smile. "Don't sell yourself short." Her words hit me like a wake-up call. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. I was learning. I was building the life I wanted, not the life my parents wanted for me. Then a couple of months later, Teresa reached out. I hadn't spoken to her since I walked out on my family. My heart still ached from the way they had treated me, and I wasn't sure I was ready to face them again. But Teresa didn't push. She simply sent a letter. A simple, heartfelt note. "I'm sorry for how things went," she wrote. "I want you to know I'm here for you no matter what. You're stronger than you think." She included $50 in the envelope, money from her own savings, not from my parents. That was significant. It showed me that Teresa was finally starting to see me, the real me. But I still wasn't ready. I didn't know if I could forgive my parents, or if I could even allow them back into my life. I had built something for myself, something they had never believed I could do. I used the $50 for groceries, but I didn't reply to Teresa's letter right away. I needed distance. Time. I had to heal, to prove to myself that I could do this without relying on anyone who had hurt me in the past. Days turned into weeks, then months. I kept working, kept going to school, kept pushing forward. There were moments of doubt, moments when I wanted to give up. But I didn't. I kept going. One evening, Wendy and I sat in her apartment eating pizza, when she raised a glass of soda. "To you, Ellen," she said, her voice full of pride. "You're doing this." I smiled for the first time in a long while, a real unburdened smile. I wasn't the broken girl who had walked out of my parents' house or left David behind. I was someone new. Someone strong. And then came the moment that really sealed it all for me. After 5 long years of pain, of rejection, of feeling like I was never enough, I landed a job at a big accounting firm in Fargo. It wasn't just any job. It was the kind of position my parents had always dreamed I would have, the kind of position they had never believed I could get. My desk overlooked the city, and every time I looked out the window, I was reminded of how far I had come. But it wasn't just the job that changed things. It was everything. It was the life I had built on my own, the confidence I had found in myself. And then one spring, Teresa texted me again. "Mom and Dad want to see you. They're sorry. They miss you." The words stirred a storm inside me, a mix of anger, indifference, and a deep, deep sadness. They wanted to see me? After everything they had done? After throwing me out, telling me never to come back? I stared at the message, my finger hovering over the keyboard. But I didn't reply. I didn't need to. "They made their choice," I texted back to Teresa. "I'm done with them. I don't owe them anything." And I didn't. I had spent 5 years building a life I could be proud of, a life that was mine, no one else's. And I wasn't going to let their guilt, their apologies, or their regret pull me back. They had lost me for good. David didn't fare any better. I heard through Wendy that his dream of opening his own auto shop had collapsed. The loans he had taken out to start the business were a disaster. The shop tanked, and David was left with nothing. He reached out to Wendy once asking about me, but I had already blocked his number. David, like my parents, had made his choice. And now, like them, he had to live with it. 5 years later, I could finally say that I had built something real. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. I had Ronald, a kind, steady man who had become my partner, and a job that fulfilled me. I had everything I needed, everything I had built on my own. And as for my parents, their regret? It was theirs to carry, not mine. Sometimes revenge isn't about striking back in anger. It's about living your life on your own terms. And in the end, that was all the revenge I needed. It's hard, to walk away from everything you've ever known, to let go of the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally. But sometimes you have to choose yourself. Sometimes walking away is the only way to reclaim your power. I hope my story resonates with you. If you've ever been in a place where you had to choose yourself, where you had to fight for your happiness, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. And remember, no matter what happens, you're worth more than the people who don't see your value. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button, drop a comment below, and share your own experiences of walking away from toxic people. And of course, don't forget to subscribe for more stories of strength, resilience, and payback. Until next time.